podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn. Welcome to Howie the podcast from Roker Report. And I'm not sure how many of you have been able to take in the fact we won our first opening day Premier League fixture. And not only did we nick it like we did the last time when Michael Chopra scored that last gasp winner against Tottenham Hotspur way back when, but we claimed a resounding 3-0 victory over West Ham United in front of a full house at the Stadium of Light. So we're going to continue talking about it all over again because why not? And today we have the man who quizzed Gav and James Hunter on Sunday in the glow of the day after effect, which is, of course, Martin Wanless. Hello, Martin.
Hello, mate. Any excuse to keep talking about this one because days like that don't come around too often for us, do they? So we might as well bask in the glory of it.
They don't. You did it in that kind of day after. Have you still got that warm, fuzzy feeling about you?
It's still that thing where when you've been going around your business and you're doing work and all that sort of stuff, and I just keep remembering it and smiling because it still doesn't seem completely real. The way that all panned out was perfect, and you couldn't have written it better. And it's that thing where you're slightly forgotten about it, then you just keep remembering it, and you just go, "Oh yeah, brilliant." So, hey, look, you can bottle that feeling, and let's hope we have a few more days like that over the next few months.
Yeah, I heard you say that, saying actually I had to wake up and remember it happened because I had my brother visiting, and in the morning the next day, we kind of, the first time we saw each other in the morning, we were like, we won 3-0 yesterday. we just we did that actually happened yesterday. And basically we'd spent the first hour just kind of reading everything around it and trying to take it all in and actually believe it. But as soon as I heard you say all that, Martin, where you were like, I had to kind of, did that actually happen? I think there was probably quite a few Sunderland fans who did the same on Sunday morning. Yeah,
I'm sure I wasn't alone, but that was a very legitimate feeling that I had, and I genuinely thought I dreamt it. But I hadn't.
What's it? Yeah.
Well,
I imagine there's still... No, we'll talk about it today just to make sure, I think. But I imagine that there's still a few headaches around today, even at the beginning of the week, and maybe a few people still going, actually. But we also have with us a good friend of the pod who you've heard from throughout the summer, and it's someone who's seen it all. So we're looking forward to him putting it into perspective from outside our Sunderland supporting lens, because today we're very pleased to have the one and only Ian Murtagh. Hello, Ian.
Hello, and I don't have to say Happy New Season to your listeners, do I? Because I know they're all very, very happy. Listen, journalists are meant to be a little bit detached, a little bit dispassionate, but that was pretty impossible on Saturday. I think the whole day can be summed up in two sentences. Off the pitch, Sunderland felt like a Premier League club. On the pitch, they looked like a Premier League team.
Yeah. I mean, again, just sentences like that almost throw us when I'm hearing things like that, because it's not often you hear things like that. But I mean, Ian, just in general, I mean, just about, especially, that feeling of when you've just been promoted and that first day of the season feeling. We just kind of touched on it just before we started it. It's almost like a Christmas Day type feeling, isn't it, leading up to it?
Well, you could put it this way: you did you've done your top 10 over the summer. Now, if you did a top 10 matches, then it's not beyond the realms of possibility that the last 3 matches might even figure 1, 2, 3 for some fans. So, Sunderland fans have been spoiled. Let's hope it continues. They've set standards which they've got to maintain. But I will say one thing. There's one standard they will find impossible to maintain. They've set the bar so high with the last 2 tifos. Now, how on earth do you beat that wonderful Black Cat tifo and then Saturday's Lambton Worm? I hope they do continue, but whoever the geniuses are who devise them, my goodness, have set the bar high.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant, and it just adds to that feeling around the club. And Martin, I mean, Ian's just touched on it, and actually, I think you said it in the podcast with Gavin James. But you're talking about the last 4 games, and you've got to remember what that actually followed. That followed a period of actually people were questioning the club, people were questioning the manager, people were putting questions to the players, and that came out of a run of defeats towards the end of the season where everything was questioned. And you've got to say that those 4 games, the 2 semi-final legs, Martin, the final, and this start of the season. And obviously the last fixture with almost a completely different set of players. You've got to take your hat off to that coaching staff to say, right, well, now this is where it matters, and to come out with those 4 results by hook or by crook even. But it's all about mentality, and you've got to take your hat off to the coaching staff, Martin, to get them set up to do that.
Well, I think it goes further than that as well, doesn't it? It's the whole club. The club's set up for success. And I think, the stuff on the field doesn't happen if the club's a mess off the field, because you've got the infrastructure sorted out. As Ian said, it feels like a Premier League club, and we haven't felt like a Premier League club for a long, long time. And all of this sort of stuff that was going on behind the scenes, it seems to us as if it's really kind of accelerated over the past 4 games or over the past 3 or 4 months. That's just as a result of all of that work that's gone on behind the scenes to rebuild that football club. And it feels different. It feels completely different. And if you haven't got the players coming in, if the recruitment team aren't doing the job, if you haven't got the right people in charge of recruitment, Regis Lebris isn't able to do what he can do on the coaching field. If you haven't got the investment in the coaches that they've made over the summer, you don't get that. So it's all a combination of factors. But you're right in terms of the mentality of the playing squad and the coaching staff. It's been great, but I think that's only one part of the overall story. I think you can't really look at that too much in isolation because it's actually part of something much bigger.
It's incredible. It's incredible PR for the football club, but also the city. I mean, during the match, I know the 5 Lives, Ian Dennis said he told the nation it was so loud he couldn't hear his instructions on the earphones. You've had West Ham fans on social media saying one of the best atmospheres they've ever been in, and also how they enjoyed mixing with Sunderland fans at Sheepfolds and in the city beforehand. And there will be people across the world talking about that match because whether it sends shockwaves or not, I don't know. But what it's done, it sent a powerful message to the football world, both home and abroad.
But as lots of listeners will know, I live in Australia, and it's that the game's made the national news here. This morning, I've been reading articles about Sunderland versus West Ham, and Sunderland's return to the Premier League and everything that went on around it in the press here this morning. So Ian's right; it's causing us to be talked about far and wide. Now, what we have to do at this point is celebrate that, but we have to kind of harness it, because that's not going to go on forever. Well, it might. Well, it would be nice if it did, but I don't think it will. So we've got to really harness all of that positivity, and there's so much positivity. Even the little touches like the ground being improved and the stand being named after Jimmy Montgomery and stuff like that. There's so many little bits they're getting right, the kits and all that sort of thing. We've got to really ride that momentum and get as much out of that as we can, because Saturday doesn't make it it's going to be an easy season. It's going to be a long, hard season. We're going to have really, really tough games, and they could come around quickly or not so quickly. But we've got to maintain that momentum and that feeling of positivity, because that can take us far.
Yeah. Just on Martin's point, Ian, just about that positivity and those little touches, that all builds up to almost, because part of the worry is when you ride in a wave of optimism like that one result might just pop the balloon. But all of those little touches go into building up almost to get that credit in the bank, where if a result or two doesn't go right, you're still riding that because of everything else that's going along with it.
Well, that's right. I'm hesitant to bring up a Kevin Keegan analogy, but back in the early 90s with Newcastle, he said it was like going to the top of a snow mountain, building a snowman and just letting it roll fast down the hill, gathering more and more snow. And, Sunderland, well, let's put it this way, that it's already gathering snow, isn't it? Well, just slightly on a tangent, we're talking about all the positives. And before we actually go into the football, like everyone else, I've been watching the highlights, both the Sky highlights and Match of the Day. I'll tell you something I noticed. The camaraderie between players who were strangers a month or two ago, the connection with fans. Now, I saw at the end of the game, Ballard and Alderweireld hug, as if to say, "You'll do for me, pal." You saw when Mayenda was celebrating his goal, he seems to have struck up a rapport with Siddiqui, and there were lots of more connections on the pitch. I've seen dressing room celebrations. They do not look like a group of players who've only been together 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's it. Well, I'll get into the team and those kind of players who are making their debut just when we're getting the football. But Ian, actually, we haven't kind of quizzed you for a good while because we talked to you during the transfer window. But we talked to you briefly about that. But we're now at 12 new signings and potentially still counting. Did it surprise you that Sunderland went so hard in terms of trying not to waste this opportunity of promotion, and they've gone so big?
Yes and no. I think as soon as the Diarra transfer was made public, you suddenly realised they meant business. They didn't waste any time in getting Enzo Lefebvre tied up on a permanent deal. How many times in the past have they hesitated and lost out on loan signings? As I said, that momentum, there's been a policy there that the season almost started the moment that Sunderland won promotion, and they've carried on that momentum. Now, whether you want to say that the players or a lot of the players who performed so well at Wembley have been sidelined, I think that's the wrong word. There was I don't know, but there's a clear message that they had to improve. I know it's been pointed out on the podcast in the past that they looked at the fixture list, realised that there were winnable, inverted commas, games in the first month of the season or so, and get the players in early. So I think once the Diarra happened, Lefebvre was sorted out, you realise that this club was, what we're talking about is a generational summer, really, isn't it? We really can say with a lot of substance that this is a new era for Sunderland Football Club.
Yeah. And just, Martin, just in terms of putting it into perspective, what we've actually done this summer, I mean, the only thing I can even think of, to even touch it is the season we came up with Roy Keane, when we ended up breaking the transfer record for a goalkeeper in Britain and all of that. But this is just on a completely different level, and we've got nothing to compare it to because at that point we went out and signed Trey Gordon from Scotland, a lot of championship players like Michael Chopra, but spent a lot of money. But this summer we've gone out and bought top European players after being promoted from the championship.
Well, I think it's a couple of things, isn't it? I think the Premier League's changed so much since those days of Roy Keane. Like, you look at Ipswich last year, signed a number of good championship players, really good championship players, and still struggled and didn't look like competing. And I think, the club have said, haven't they? They've looked at what promoted clubs have done over the past few years, have looked at what's worked, looked at what hasn't, and then obviously decided which path to follow. And obviously they've created their own path to some extent as well. And it's interesting that, they haven't actually changed the model that much as such. They've just put on steroids, really, haven't they? They've got great young players with lots of potential. We haven't brought a great deal of Premier League experience in, but we brought experience in from across Europe. We brought young players in from across Europe who've got a number of games under the belt. Ian talked earlier about the camaraderie and the spirit among the group. A lot of these players that they brought in were either captain or leadership roles at the club, like Diarra was captain of his club, weren't he? So you've got that bit to it. Then you've got the experience of Granit Xhaka overlaid on top of that. And, while previously we haven't paid significant fees for players really over the age of 24, Xhaka and Alderweireld kind of break that mold to an extent, don't they? But they have wanted to get experience into the club. They realise the need for that experience. And it's exciting because we don't know, like nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows how this group of players will progress. And, we got the lad in from PSG yesterday. There's another signing or two allegedly on the way. The squad and the team that we've got could be so different as we go into the season. But, I said yesterday as well, like I've been listening to all of the prediction podcasts and everyone's going, oh, Sunderland, they didn't score enough goals last season. They conceded too many goals last season. They won't do this, won't do that. All right. Nobody knows how this team's going to do. And, the other bit to it, as Ian mentioned as well, with the players from last season, again, in inverted commas, being sidelined, I think the clubs realised that the jump from finishing fourth in the Championship to surviving in the Premier League is far too big for that group of players to do. And what you would hope is the likes of Dan Neil, who sticks around, signs a new contract, and spends this season learning off Granit Xhaka. You've got this core group of players, young players, who've got significant Championship experience. If they have a season learning off some of these players that we brought in, getting some experience of Premier League football, in 12, 18, 24 months' time, they could be really ready to compete at a good level of the Premier League. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how some of them react to all of it. Some might really want to go out and play football again, and you wouldn't blame them, would you? But I just think it's such an exciting time to watch us play, man.
I know, Martin, you referenced the transfer recruitment policy under Roy Keane in 2007. And yes, there is a similarity in terms of numbers, but maybe that was a little bit scattergun. And yes, there were good signings that did come in. But out of all these 11, 12 players, you can go through them all, and there's a logic behind every single signing. Yeah. The fans, and even non-Sunderland fans, are looking, say, that makes sense. Yeah, I can understand why they brought him in. Oh, that's a good signing. And you can go right through the list. And I think that was evidenced by the performance on Saturday.
And with that as well, you can tell they've been... Sorry, okay. Just you can tell they've obviously been recruited for certain positions. But the way that, going back to Chris's point earlier on, the way that they've got them coached and drilled into how to play, and each player understands the role that they've been brought in to do. I think on Saturday that was so evident in how we set up.
It certainly looks that way.
It's so impressive, the work that they've done. They brought the players in early. Got them. A lot of them came in early. They've had trips away to build that camaraderie. They've had trips away to spend time on the training field. And I think again, it's just one game, but on Saturday you could see that everyone knew their job. There wasn't anyone wondering sort of, where should I be? What should I do? Xhaka was keeping everybody sort of in line and barking orders out and organising. But they looked really well drilled. And for a team that had 7 debutants in it from the off, to look that well drilled on day one, it's testament to the work that's gone on behind the scenes.
You say just one game, and of course that's right. Now, had Sunderland lost their first game, I'd have had to question my own assumptions for the season. There would be a lot of people outside of Wearside and the North East who'd be saying, relegation photo, thought so. There'd have even been a lot of Sunderland fans who'd be thinking, maybe the step up is too big. Now, just because they won doesn't mean they're safe. But what it means, as we say, they're still riding this wave of optimism. And we're now talking about a group of players, not as a disparate group of individuals, but as a team who are showing very, very early signs of gelling. So, it's not a case of, yes, Sunderland are staying up, but those pessimists have certainly been given food for thought, while optimists like me have, we've had our assumptions not vindicated yet, but reinforced.
Yeah. And just quickly, Ian, last one before we get into the football, but Martin touched on that magic word, and if anyone's playing Sunderland bingo, they'll have knocked it off their card. But he mentioned the model. Now, this summer, we've brought in that mix, that blend of experience like Xhaka and Ronaldo, Alderete, you could put into that. And then the youth and potential, Siddiqui, Diarra, Talby, Adingra, if you like, slightly older. But this seems to be more of a blend. So you look in the past where I think at one point we were going too far in one direction in terms of the youth. And then last season we added Brown and Mepham just to kind of give us a little bit of stability in terms of that experience. This season we've gone for a real blend. So where do you think that evolution is in terms of how we're going along with this model?
I think Reggie's Debris made a very interesting point in his Thursday press conference to the written media. What he was talking about was how he was inferring you need experience at the back. But he said he wants his attacking players to be risk takers. And he said with youth comes that almost like a natural sense of taking risk. So, I don't think it's surprising that the more mature players are the ones who fill more defensive roles. And the younger players, if you want to call them unproven, let's call them that. But they're the ones who are in the wide roles of midfield.
Yeah. Just quickly, Martin, just again, before we get into the football, just on that model, because you brought it up. I'll blame you because you brought it up first. But again, I was talking about this. I see it as seemingly evolving into they're knocking it into shape. It's not just this is the model and we're sticking with it. But where do you see this fitting with that 5-year plan this summer? Is this the kind of the big one that then after that they just think, right, well, actually, after that it needs tweaks. This is the big one.
Oh, I think it's definitely it's almost the make or break pre-season for the model in a lot of respects, isn't it, for that plan? And I think the amount of money that we've seen spent this summer, it's kind of been planned almost in advance. So I think, there was some criticism in the past few transfer windows, hasn't it, about us not spending a great deal on players and not splashing out fees for anybody over 24 and the resale value and all that sort of stuff. But as far as I understand it, that's kind of enabled us to spend as much as we have this summer because we haven't got losses carried over from the past couple of seasons. You've invested in the likes of Job, moved him on for great money. Tommy Watson, moved him on for good money. You've had Jack Clark last season, move him on for a good profit. So I think it's kind of almost been planned. And I think my kind of reading in between the lines of it is like the club thought, we'll take that approach until we get promoted. When we get promoted, this is what that will have enabled us to do. So I think it's been relatively well planned out. And they're never going to say that publicly. They're never going to go, well, we're not going to spend a great deal now. So if and when we get promoted, we will spend. Because it's, the jam tomorrow stuff, isn't it? But really, I think that's kind of how it's played out. And I think that's how they've planned it to a large extent as well.
Yeah, I think we need to get Kieran Maguire on to talk about the financial aspect of it. And
it'll be interesting, won't it?
Yeah, that's it. Well, look, let's get into the game. And I just want to start with that feeling that we've been talking about, Ian, before the game, because I imagine that we're talking about this wave of positivity and the atmosphere, and you were talking about reporters saying they couldn't hear instructions in their ears. I mean, you've seen a lot of occasions like this, I imagine, Ian, but sometimes do you just think when you get that feeling and you're in a stadium like that, that almost sometimes there's only going to be one winner because of this buzz around the place and this feeling, it can't go the other way sometimes when you get that feeling when you're in a stadium like that?
Well, yes and no. I thought Sunderland started with assurance, not necessarily with spark, but they competed. And then I did think minutes 20 to 40 were quite worrying. And maybe that's when any pre-match optimism was vanishing because Bowen was the best player on the park at that time. And rather than get away from defenders, you could see him backing into them because he knew he could spin them. I think he spanned out a couple of times, looked very dangerous. Yet Sunderland just about recovered their composure in the 5 minutes leading up to half-time. And I remember talking to people at half-time, and the general feeling was this could go one of three ways. So, yeah, West Ham, a lot of people are saying what a poor team they are. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. That can be seen as a positive, whichever way you if West Ham are a bad team, then that means that they're going to be struggling this season. And if Sunderland's prime aim is to finish above 3 teams, then you can make a case that West Ham would be one of those 3 teams. If you say then Sunderland made West Ham look poor in that second half, then, well, that's even better, isn't it? That's like Sunderland, they won't just be fighting it out for survival this season, they could do a little bit more than that. So you can take that argument whichever way you want.
Yeah. And Martin, just in terms of, we touched on it earlier, but all of those players, that long list of players to make their debut, because obviously what you're talking, saying Hume, Ballard, Sealt and Mayenda, and that was it from last season's squad in that first 11. I mean, there's a massive question mark when you do that, though, Martin, because you've already touched on it. I mean, we always say pre-season means nothing, and we do mean it, but there's a question mark when all those players are thrown in. You just don't know how they're going to react together. You don't know if there's going to be any chemistry. Sometimes you see on international level, sometimes players who don't know each other, just good players, sometimes it falls apart. So there's still a massive question mark, even though you've got faith in all of those players individually.
Oh, it's a huge unknown, isn't it? And even if you look at the 4 players from last season who played on Saturday, I think Ballard only started, 12 or 13 games last season. Silt never started a game. So really, you only had Trey Hume and Eliza Mayenda in that starting 11 who were anything like regulars for the last season. So you've got that aspect to it. You know, as I said before, you've got a number of players who were brought in relatively early. But then you've got people like the goalkeeper, Ruffs, who arrived, 10 days ago? You know, and he's looked so assured in goal in the games he's played. So, you know, you've got to, again, give them so much credit. And, you know, the spirit and camaraderie that they have shown, it shows that as a group, it's a good group to come into. You know, I think I said this a couple of weeks ago in terms of, you know, that concern that I had. You know, you've got, and if we were all playing in the team last season, we were all stalwarts of the team from last season, and you see all of these players coming in to take your place or challenge for your places. It's human nature, isn't it, to be a bit like, what the hell are they doing? We've earned the right to come and play here. And it would be very easy for that squad, if it wasn't really well managed, to be a little bit sort of fractious. But you've got people like Luke O'Nien leading the group, and you know, it's up to the players who come in to kind of bring that positivity as well. But I think, you know, there's an awful lot of talk that has gone on in the past about them recruiting for personality as much as for the playing profile, and understanding what sort of person they're bringing into the club as well as what sort of player they're bringing into the club. And I think all of those things, if you don't get them right, it could have been a huge risk. Actually, wasn't worth taking, but fortunately, it paid off in it. The exciting thing is that you think it'll get better and better.
Yeah, I mean, Ian, just from your point of view, because we did a podcast talking about previous promotions, and you know, from a fan's point of view, and actually from a local reporter's point of view, from the likes of yourself, I go back to Peter Reid's first promotion. Now, I remember thinking, I can't wait to see Andy Melville, Richard Ord, Martin Scott, Kevin Ball. You know, I want to see those players in the Premier League play for Sunderland, because you invested so much emotion into them, because they got us there. They got the prize and they did that effort. Now, it seems with this Sunderland club now, it's just very business-like, and it's like, no, we're going to lay down a marker for those players to say we're improving, and you've got to try and catch up and keep up with us.
That's right. I think you're talking about that side. Didn't they draw? Wasn't it a goalless draw in the opening game at Roker Park, and then won 4-1 at Nottingham Forest? When it must be the only journalist who got the word quintessential into an intro of a newspaper, because Quinny scored 2 goals. But looking at this team, and if I may, I'd like to focus on one or two individuals as well. The way I see Sunderland, they will spring attacks rather than build attacks. That's because they possess pace, enormous pace. Diarra particularly caught the eye. Large strides. He runs almost as quickly with the ball than without it, which is a hell of a good quality to have. I'd like to pinpoint one moment in the second half. I think it was still goalless. I think you'll remember it when he was found and he delayed his pass just a little bit too much, and with players waiting in the middle, it went out for a corner instead. Now, Mayenda was level with him for the pass. So was Adingra. Two players who had got into the box after a lightning transition. Now, that is hugely encouraging. I'd like to focus on Mayenda, not just because I put him in my fantasy team, because he intrigues me. I've focused my match report into today's Mirror on him, and I said there is a reason why Sunderland's spending spree has not included a proven goal scorer, and his name is Mayenda. We all know he has raw potential. Now, his first two touches of that game, he was out-muscled by, I think it was Kilman, twice, but he went in for more. Now, he still does have a little bit of a tendency to drift out of games, but not as much as in the past. So Michael Bridges made a very good point on the Sky commentary. He said he holds his position very well up front. That was a terrific goal. I mean, that was a goal which you see in black and white reels in the Nat Lofthouse or whatever, you know. It was a real old-fashioned centre-forward goal. He also showed a tremendous speed and get to the byline when Adingra had that half chance just after half-time. So I was encouraged. And of course, like any striker, that surge of confidence which will have gone through his body when the ball hit the back of the net, same with Isidore later on, that's going to do them the power of good.
Yeah. And actually, just on that, Martin, we'll kind of get into the game, because actually I thought like the first 10 minutes, it surprised me because I thought it was going to be two sides trying to avoid defeat. But actually, both sides came out the blocks and kind of almost going for it. And then there was that first big moment, and I think Ian slightly touched on it. Bourne had that good chance early on. Now, we said it a lot in the Championship, Martin, but in the Premier League, it's going to be even more important to be on the right side of those big moments, because once a team gets ahead, there's a completely different dynamic, I think, in the Premier League to the Championship. But we'll come on to the opposition's goalkeeper's debut performance, I think, in a little bit. But it was an early test for Roofs. And he had to get that right, because that on his debut, under pressure, all that atmosphere, and you get Bowen charging down on you in the early stages, first few minutes, and you have to get that right.
Oh, 100%. And he got it right, didn't he? Again, he's been so impressive since he's come in. He's looked so assured, and he does all of the things that you expect from a goalkeeper. I know it's a daft thing to say. All the things you expect from a goalkeeper, he does really, really well. He just looks confident. He looks imposing, and he looks proactive as a goalkeeper. I think often you get keepers who are reactive, don't you? They just react to what's going on around him. He tries to make things happen. And yeah, look, he got down well. I think it's one of those he would have been disappointed to have conceded from that point, because it was a decent chance from Bowen, but I think he got in behind Silt, didn't he? And I think that's where Ian mentioned earlier, there was a couple of times where Silt got turned. And, I said in the pod yesterday, I think the game completely changed. And this is no criticism of Silt. I thought he actually did pretty well throughout the course of the game. But I think the game changed completely when he went off. And whether that was completely coincidental or just a little bit coincidental, people can make their own minds up about it. But I just thought the introduction of Alderete, I know we'll kind of skip forward to the second half now, but still 0-0. But the introduction of Alderete, when he came on, made a world of difference to how we actually approached the rest of that game.
Yeah, that's it. And Ian, after that early kind of scare, I suppose, we got back into it. Diarra was starting to get forward. We got a couple of chances. But just in terms of that step up to the Premier League, because in that, it was a pretty even first half, but you called it that 20 to 40 minutes, because I think what happened was West Ham changed their system slightly, and they reacted to what we would do, and they changed their system slightly. and then they got on top. But again, just going back to all of those new players, it's a huge sign that when the game did change a little bit and West Ham reacted to us, that again, when they put a bit of pressure on us, all of these players who, again, haven't been playing together for all that long, were able to stand up to it.
Absolutely. I was going to raise that point myself. Football is as much about what you do off the ball as on it. And, these players, they showed they're not prima donnas. I saw Sudoku throw himself at somebody. You saw people doing the dirty work. I think Adingra impressed me the way that what he did off the ball, tracking back so much, and Tolby as well. So yeah, that was very encouraging. They were, I think, quite comprehensively outplayed for that 20-minute spell, but there weren't too many chances that West Ham created when they were on top.
Yeah, that's it. And you're talking about us getting back into the game, and Martin, and that trying to around. And I think Martin, what Ian touched on before, is something I don't think I've seen from the Sunderland side for a long time, which is that pace all over the park. Even Ronaldo at fullback, on the wings, the Diarra and Siddiqui, two players who just cover so much ground, Martin. And it's a breath of fresh air. I mean, even from last season, last couple of seasons, when you could argue when we've been successful reaching the playoffs in the Championship, it hasn't been done with all that much pace, but we've just got it all over the park now, which I'm not sure I've seen in the Sunderland side.
No, we haven't, have we? And, it's obviously key to making our style of play work. And it's interesting, your kind of perceptions of that first half, because, Sunderland are never going to be a team that dominates possession for huge chunks of the game. We're really happy to concede possession and actually try to then find gaps behind the defence on the counter-attack. And I think that's, to some degree, that's what we tried to do in that middle period of the first half, but we just couldn't interrupt the play enough to actually spring those breaks. But that pace, you're absolutely right. Like, that pace is like, I don't think we've ever seen it at Sunderland in that volume. You've had one or two players who were pacey, and last season we had, Isidore, Mundell, Mayenda, people like that who can run with the ball and can break and get over the top. But to have that pace in the centre of midfield with Diarra and Siddiqui. Last season, Chris Rigg and Joe Bellingham played there for lots of the season. And as good as they both are, one thing that they're not in possession of is really lightning pace. And it just makes such a difference. But it's not just the pace, it's the work rate. Ian pointed out Dingra's work rate, brilliant. He worked really, really hard up and down that line. But if you look at the distances that our midfield covered, you're talking 11, 12 kilometres over the course of the game. I think I saw a table with all of the distances covered in the Premier League this weekend, and we've got players in the top 6 or 7 positions.
I noticed that as well, Martin. I think this is Siddiqui, Diarra, Xhaka, and I think is it Ronaldo? I think all 4 feature, don't they, in distances covered?
They do. And look, the question mark then is how long you can actually keep that work rate up. You're going to tire at some point. I don't think it's necessarily feasible for those individual players to keep that up every single game, but that's why we're building a squad. That's why we're building that depth of squad, so you can potentially keep that up. And again, I thought for large bits of the game, we saw us doing what we were really, really good at doing last season, which was a high press, which we hadn't seen for almost the second half of the season. And again, I think there was a number of reasons for that. Tiredness was probably part of it in the second half of the campaign last year. But we saw that. You saw the power and the pace on the counter-attack. You saw us being really well organised and happy to concede possession in order to work those spaces and go and attack. And again, I think, that's what gives me confidence. And look, there's something that come back and bite me on the arse at the end of the season. But this gives me really confidence because we're not trying to go out and dominate possession like Southampton and Burnley and other teams in the past have done. We've got a different sort of style of play, and I think it's probably better suited to the Premier League than actually was to the Championship.
You mentioned about I was going to say, you mentioned Southampton, Burnley, and two sides who've been relegated over the past 2 years. And, when people, I think, and I could be proved wrong, but I think it is a mere coincidence that the three clubs promoted in the last 2 seasons have gone down. Now, of course, there's a gap. I'm not trying to minimise that gap. But if you take last season, Leicester were a club where it was falling apart internally, power struggles, etc. And that's certainly not the case at Sunderland. Ipswich were a club whose transfer policy was flawed in that they thought they could get the best of the Championship and that would suffice in the Premier League. That's flawed. And of course, Russell Martin decided to play from the back, whoever it was against, whether it was Man City or Liverpool. And he played a system which clearly his individual players weren't capable of implementing effectively at the highest level. So, last season there were mistakes by all relegated clubs. It looks as if Sunderland will avoid those mistakes. Certainly, Lebris has showed himself to be a pragmatic manager who will adjust tactics to suit the opposition.
Yeah. Well, just on those tactics, Ian, because Martin touched on it there, that when this game finished, I thought it felt very much like the beginning of last season. Because if you look, we had 30-odd% possession and we were aiming to hit the opposition on the break and catch them cold when they were attacking. And it seemed to me like we tried to do a similar thing. But again, going back to the recruitment, it just seems now Lebris going, right, because the second half, we weren't able to do it as much in the second half of the season. And Lebris, it just feels like he's now got the players to play like he wants us to.
Well, let's not forget, Sunderland did not better their performances in those opening 4 games last season throughout the rest of the campaign. Am I right in thinking this 3-0 win, it's only the second time in 10 months where they've had a win by more than 1 goal? I think it's very much, as I said, I think he's a horses for courses manager. He will play a very, very different game against Manchester City as he would against Bournemouth, who wouldn't. I shouldn't use Bournemouth as an analogy now because we're pretty impressive at Anfield, weren't they? But he did hint at a slight change at half-time in that he thought that West Ham had countered Sunderland's early press quite effectively and learned how to handle it. So Sunderland they dropped back a little bit and, as I mentioned before, tried to spring attacks rather than build attacks.
Yeah. And you touched on that first goal, Ian, so I'll just quiz Martin on it because that first goal, brilliant, fantastic header, and you can get into the header. But I just want to kind of mention where it came from because you talked about that substitution, Sealt, which I felt a little bit sorry for, I have to admit, with these injury problems, getting injured again and having to go off injured. But Alderete came on, Martin, and we had all this, he's just a big bruiser. We saw all these stats that, from Getafe, who were a big, just like to kick teams up a height, and he didn't have many passing stats, and he was really low down on those, and all of this, and you just thought, we've brought in a real bruiser at the back. Steps out of defence, crosses the ball in, and gets the assist for the first goal of the season. But brilliant cross from a player we didn't expect, and an unbelievable header.
Oh, look. Excellent cross, and I think that shows in terms of the recruitment as well. We obviously recruited him to play on the left-hand side of the defence. He's left-footed, so he was able to step out and whip that cross in. And even though his stats, suggested he maybe wasn't much of a passer, he wasn't a cultured footballer. He was a blood and thunder defender. I think Getafe kind of play like that, don't they? So, that probably masked something. But he looked every inch of a very calm, cultured central defender. He was able to get the ball down, knock it around, do Cruyff turns in his own box, pick out crosses, all sorts of things. He defended exceptionally well as well. So, look, I think he'll come back into the team, or come into the team for Saturday's game, I would imagine. But look, the crossing point was great. The header from Mayenda was beautifully guided, and it's one of those where I don't know if you asked him what he was trying to do, whether he was trying to score or just guide it into the right position. I don't know what his thought was, but to get that header he was quite far out, wasn't he? And to get that header so perfectly placed says a lot about him. Look, it's a massive goal for him because he's struggled a little bit in front of goal during pre-season. He's missed a few sitters. He missed a penalty over in Germany. He hasn't hit the back of the net, I don't think. So to get off the mark in your first Premier League game, and with Isidore as well, mind, for those two both getting the score sheet, it'll do them the world of good. And as Ian said, I think, whether the club have tried to get centre forwards in, I think there's been one or two rumours, hasn't it? But the vast majority of talk has been around the midfield and defence. The talk around centre forwards has been few and far between. And I think that is testament to the amount of faith they have in Mayenda especially, but also Isidore, because I think both of them can score goals in top flight.
I think Graham Potter was quite disparaging and begrudging in his assessment of the goal. I think, didn't he say, well, he's hardly Niall Quinn or something along that? I think he should be asking more questions about how Alderete was allowed the freedom of Sunderland to examine his options and then get out his 7-iron before chipping the ball to Mayenda.
Yeah, not just that, but I do think Hermansen dived as if he had his shoelaces tied together. But we'll come on to him in a minute because actually it's this thing though, Ian. Especially in the Premier League, because 3 points is almost like a cup final when you do get in the lead and you get your noses in front. And I have to admit, as a glass half empty, sometimes Sunderland fan, you go, all right, well, now the nerves kick in. Do you retreat to the edge of your own box? Do you just want to protect those 3 points? But it was about 10 minutes later, we kind of seemed to grow, and we were kind of putting pressure on. And Adingra, who I will actually say that he, in terms of putting the pressure on, in the first half, he did get a bit of a bollocking early in the first half because he wasn't putting pressure on them. And you saw a change in his mentality when I think he didn't chase back when he lost the ball early in the first half, and the manager and a few players were on his back. And you saw the impact of that, where basically he ended up doing the press, winning the corner, and then it came out and he put the cross in, and Ballard put us 2 up, which basically is the winning goal essentially in a game like that.
That's right. I wasn't aware that he got into trouble for tracking back, but yeah, that's right. And let's remember, he won the corner on the left, and he crossed for the goal from the right. So, he is somebody who quite obviously can play either flank.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, Ballard doing it again, Martin, because I might end up getting in a man of the match territory. You talked about it on the other thing, but there was question marks last season about, can he step it up? He's got position and pace. Is he a Premier League player? And just by almost sheer character, in terms of his defending, he was unbelievable, throwing himself everywhere, making sure he's in the right position, but doing it again. In terms of, the last game was Coventry, and then he steps up again. And I mean, I don't think many people would have had money on him doing it again, really.
No, you could have made some good money at the bookies if you had a DeLorean and a Sporting Almanac, couldn't you? Because, the odds would have been stacked firmly against him. But look, I think Ballard's a really interesting one for me, right? Because if you remember when you came to the club, he came from Arsenal, he's really highly rated, he had some good loan spells, and he was viewed as somebody who was taking a step into the Championship to get back to the Premier League, a Premier League defender in waiting. And he's had terrible luck with injuries. And I think he had a really poor 2024. All told, I think he struggled with injury, but the FA Cup game against the Mags, I think he got shown up really for his pace and mobility and all that sort of stuff. And look, he had to sit out the vast majority of last season. Luke O'Nien and Chris Mepham were the first choice centre halves for the large part of it, and he's come back in. And whether it's all down to him or I think it probably is, he's forced his way back into the reckoning. For him to put himself even into the team for the Coventry semi-finals, he's worked really hard. He looks more athletic. He looks stronger. He looks more robust than he had done for most of 2024. So for him to come into the team and play as well as he has done in the two semi-finals of the playoffs, the playoff final and the game against West Ham, it's testament to him. And look, we're going to need that character in defence this season in terms of throwing your body on the line, getting stuck in, chucking your head in places, which Ballard does magnificently. And at the minute, it's his shirt to lose, isn't it? Because I don't think there's any way in the world you can see Lebris taking him out of the team if he's performing the way he is. And you know, the thing that Ballard offers, which we've seen in the last few months, is a goal threat. You know, from set pieces, he's always offered us that. He's always been a danger. And when he's not in the team, we do miss that because he is genuinely threatening from set balls and the aerial threat that he has. So, look, I think Ballard's been great, and I think he's realising the potential that we thought he had when we first signed him. He showed very early on. And you just keep your fingers crossed that his bad luck he's had with injuries he's over that now. And, you know, you get the sense that he just looks fitter and stronger. And he's you know, if he plays like he did on Saturday, he is a Premier League class defender.
He looks like a centre-half, doesn't he?
Yep.
You know, he does.
You know that there's a number 5 on his back. And perhaps we've already seen the most crucial moment of the season, and that goal line clearance in the first half. You know, goals change matches, and who's to say had he not been there and the Juve goal had that shot had become a goal, Sunderland were trailing 1-0, it could have been a 0-1 result. And so, you know, that was, well, because Sunderland won 3-0, you could make an argument to say that clearance was more important than his goal.
Yeah. Another player I wanted to mention for that second goal, Ian, was Ronaldo, because he picked up the ball just inside our own half and stepped out and stepped forward. And just little things like that. You just know that a player looks like he knows what he's doing when he's doing things like this. And Ronaldo looks like some player.
I saw Michael Gray in the mix zone afterwards, and I said, Michael, you've lost your place in the old-time Sunderland 11. And listen, you're not buying mediocrity when you're recruiting a left-back who's played so many games for Atletico Madrid. He looks, for a start, a natural left-back, doesn't he? He loves to defend. His tackling, there's a technique about it, isn't it? He stays very, very tall. He gets as close to his opponent as he possibly can, and he's beavering away at it. And then he did come in as someone known more as an orthodox left-back than an attacking left-back. But yes, for that second goal, just that football intelligence to see the space between the two West Ham people on either side of him. And he didn't try and charge up to the byline. He just bisected the two and then fed Adingra and thought, well, let me let one of the attackers do the rest of it. And tremendous player. I think the fans are going to love him.
Yeah, and just another one. I want to stay with you for a second, Ian, because we had big talks about Thomas Sorensen in various pods over the summer, and after that, West Ham tried to put on a bit of pressure, and Roofs had to make another save where he tipped it over the bar. I mean, it was in, it wasn't a few yards either side of him. It was a nice place for him to tip over the bar. But still, Ian, that's going to be important that there was at the very least pressure put on Patterson. And Roofs does look like a safe pair of hands.
He does. I think a few moments after that, didn't he? He fumbled across, but it was certainly a 7.5, 8 out of 10 performance, and he did show great agility to spare Wilson Easter's blushes. Then, I mean, the fact is he has arguably got less experience at senior level than anyone else on the pitch, but he did seem unflappable, and his temperament did seem very calm and composed.
Yeah, and looking forward to seeing him throughout the season. And we get in injury time. West Ham are putting pressure on with a bunch of corners, Martin. And then we kind of break from one of them, and Talpi stands on the ball and waits for someone to make a run. And Isidore goes down the wing, and everyone's just expecting him 2-0 up in the injury time. Get that ball in the corner, stand on it a little bit. I think he had other things on his mind, of course, ran straight towards the area. Now, this was kind of a typical Isidore shot, if you like, from last season, and he got a couple of goals from it. And I slightly hinted that if I was a West Ham fan, certainly, but I just think brilliant headers from Mayenda and Ballard. But if I was a West Ham fan, I'd have big question marks on the first couple of goals with Hermansen, and new keeper in goal for them. But on this one, I don't know what he quite did, because it seemingly like if he just wanted to save it, it was an easy save, but he wanted to do some sort of Gordon Banks and tip it over the bar for, in the 6-yard box or something. I mean, the keeper should have done better, but in terms of Isidore's character and that feeling around the team that he can pick up the ball and come on a sub and think, no, I'm going for goal here. I'm gonna get a 30 and I'm gonna get on the score sheet.
Oh, look, it's brilliant. And I think you look at Lefebvre and Isidore came on, and to have two players like that who you can bring off the bench to start with is pretty unbelievable. But for those two to come on and contribute in the way they did, you could, maybe less so with Isidore, but you completely sympathise with Lefebvre if his nose is a bit out of joint, because he would have been fully expecting to start the season in the starting 11. But he's shown good attitude, I think, and he made some comments after the game about understanding the need to be part of the squad and having complete faith in Lebris and all that sort of stuff. But look, the goal was interesting, wasn't it? I think it's down to Isidore to a large degree, because Talby had a similar sort of position a few moments earlier, and he kind of checked back, retained possession, and you kind of go, well, that's a smart, sensible thing to do. Well done. Isidore's stepping through there. And look, Isidore has got a bit of a point to prove. I think, again, we've talked about previously, haven't we? But if somebody had said to you at the turn of the year that not only would Isidore lose his place to Mayenda at some point throughout the rest of that course of the season, that Mayenda would start a Premier League game ahead of Isidore, you'd have thought they were nuts. Like, Spurs were being linked with him, and there was all this talk around Isidore. And I think it subsequently transpired that he's had a few personal issues off the field and all that sort of stuff, which kind of derailed him a little bit for the last part of the season last year. But he's got a point to prove. And I think people have kind of almost forgotten about Isidore in terms of being a potential Premier League striker. And I think he feels that himself as well. So he came on and he wanted to score for him. Now, if it had been 1-0 and he'd done that, the keeper saves it and boots it up the other end to start an attack, maybe we'd all be kind of feeling slightly different about how he approached that. But for him to come on and take that opportunity, he wanted to score. He wanted to remind everybody that he's got the quality to help us in the Premier League. And look, the goalkeeper was awful for it. The goalkeeper really should have saved it. It was a bit like Ben Wilson at Coventry, wasn't it, where he probably should have done better. But the fact he takes a shot so early, I think, catches the goalkeeper completely by surprise. So he's already got a couple of milliseconds advantage, because I think the keeper was expecting him to either retain possession or run further into the box with the ball. The fact he took it so early caught him a little bit off guard. But notwithstanding that, he absolutely should have saved it. If I was a West Ham fan, I'd be a little bit concerned about the vast amounts of money I've just spent on a new goalkeeper. He was significantly more expensive than Rofs was. So, again, it's only one game. He might go on to have a cracking season. But I know which one I'd rather have in goal.
Yeah, that's it. And Ian, just a word on West Ham, because it's been kind of well documented in the kind of national press, and a certain Mr. Shearer decided to focus on West Ham as well, and talk about them. But do we have to keep our feet on the ground? Because West Ham's a bit of a strange one when you look at them. You look at their first 11, and we did coming up to the game, and we thought they've got some fantastic players, but they looked good in spells. But as soon as that first goal went in, they seemed to just completely dismantle themselves and just kind of fall apart. Now, how do we judge ourselves by playing this West Ham side? Do we just think, yes, we stepped it up and we took advantage of a side whose mentality might not be fantastic? But so where does this sit on the scale of, keeping our feet on the ground, or let's get carried away?
Well, first of all, in Alan Shearer's defence, 6 o'clock this morning, I listened to the Gary Lineker, the podcast he does with Gary Lineker and Micah Richards, The Rest is Football. And he did say he'd been getting a bit of stick from his Sunderland supporting pals for not praising Sunderland too much in Match of the Day. Well, if you listen to that podcast, he does praise Sunderland quite a bit there. So anyway, West Ham, I include them before the season started in my 3 to go down. I don't think all's well there. Yes, they've got some individuals, but it's a lack of their mentality seemed weak. The fact they collapsed, they were after 1 hour. Let's not forget it was 0-0, and they lost 3-0. That's put yourself in a West Ham fan's shoes, and that is a desperately disappointing start of the season. They're already talking about make or break against Chelsea at the London Stadium on Friday night. If they lose that, will the pressure already be on Graham Potter? He hasn't done particularly well. I think, is it only 2 wins in the last 12? I might be wrong on that stuff. It's pretty similar to it. Bowen is a diamond. Terrific player. Paqueta had a few moments, although he was increasingly uninfluential as the match wore on. Diouf looks half-decent player. The 3 defenders, it wasn't their best of days. Ward-Prowse, he's a good dead ball specialist, but he didn't influence the match either. So if I'd be a West Ham fan, I'd be quite worried, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, Martin, I'll put the same across to you, because obviously we're basking in a 3-0 win. But how do you see this in terms of keeping our feet in the ground, in terms of looking at the opposition, and added to that, Burnley away, then Brentford at home, which after a win like that just feels like just a brilliant opportunity to get these early points on the board and keep riding this wave?
Well, it is a great opportunity. And look, I think it's really difficult to assess either club or any club after the first game of the season. There's still going to be transfers to be made. There'll still be players moving in and out of most clubs. New players settling in. We don't know how they're going to settle in and what form they're going to produce as they kind of get into it. We don't know how winter's going to affect different people and all that sort of stuff. So look, there's so many unknowns still. But I think what we've experienced on Saturday is all we could have possibly hoped for. The new players have come in, looked good, looked as if they've got huge potential, and they've played well. They look as if they're really settling into the club. They look as if they're bought into what LeBris is trying to do. They look as if they know the jobs, and it looks as if we've recruited well for the positions that we need to fill. All we can do is take, I know it's a complete cliche, isn't it? So, shoot me now, but all we can do is take each game as it's like we can go to Burnley. Our mood could go, if we get beat on Saturday, when we're talking next Monday, our mood could be completely different. Because, we've got a little ahead of ourselves there. We're not as good as we thought. We're going to need to do this, that, or the other. We're going to need to recruit here. So, look, this can change in a second. What we've done is given ourselves the best possible chance now of going in next Saturday with a win, because they're going to be, Burnley are going to have the opposite problem, aren't they? They've gone away at Spurs, got beat, got relatively outplayed. The star defence that they had last season looked a bit leaky on Saturday. The pressure's all on them in front of their home crowd now to go and turn over Sunderland, because they'll have looked at the fixture list. Okay, well, might be able to get something at Spurs. Sunderland at home, first home game of the season, brilliant. That's what their reaction would have been. So I think we just have to see what we can get out of those games. But the biggest positive for me, outside of everything I've said, is that we're still going to want to do business in this window. We're still going to want to attract players. And if we've got 3 points on the board from Saturday, which we have, if we get a few more points in the next few games, we end August with maybe 6, 7, 8 points, whatever it might be, 9 points, 10 points. All of a sudden, players who are looking at us are going, it might not be a complete scrap at the bottom of the table after all. And it just strengthens our hand when we're playing. If they're looking at a club who's on the up, they're looking at a squad that's playing well and brought players in, giving them game time and the quality of the recruitment that they can see. So, look, again, I'll go back to what I said before. For all of us as Sunderland supporters watching that team, and actually anybody watching that team, we don't know what's going to happen. We can't tell what's going to happen with this group of players, and that's, again, a pretty exciting thing to look at.
Just the last word from you, Ian, because as Martin said, it's a game of two halves and it's 11 against 11 and everything that Martin said there. But last word from you, Ian, because, you've got to back a win like this up in the Premier League, haven't you? You can't follow this a win like this up. It's about getting consistency and keep picking up points. You can't then follow it up with 5 defeats and lose that feeling. You've got to try and back these up.
I'm not going to make a prediction for Saturday, but what I will say is if on Saturday night Sunderland have beaten Burnley, then I believe that after the third game, they will pick 3 out of 3. Because if they can win at home against West Ham, win away, and I think the Brentford game, and Brentford are in for a season of struggle, will be another win for Sunderland. So that's how I'd finish. Wouldn't that be lovely?
Well, you heard it here first. Ian says we're going to be top of the league after 3 games. So we'll
no. I'm not making any predictions for Turf Moor, but I will happily predict that they're on 9 points if, it's a big if, they beat Burnley.
Brilliant. Well, just to finish off, Ian, what's your next assignment?
The next match I'm reporting it will be Newcastle-Liverpool next on Monday.
Ooh.
Which should be very fiery. It should be very fiery.
Yeah, look forward to them. They've got, historically, it's a good game, isn't it?
I don't think it'll be 4-3.
No, no, I don't think there's going to be many of those these days. But brilliant, and it just leaves us to say thank you very much, Ian. Always appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
Good stuff. And Martin, I'm sure we might just continue talking about the 3-0 win this week, are we?
Well, I think this is going out on Tuesday morning, so by the time Wednesday rolls around, we're going to have to start looking forwards, aren't we, rather than backwards, so we can enjoy the 3 points for a little longer. But this doesn't really define anything at all. It's a great start, but you know what I'm like. I'm always tick it off and then go into the next one. So let's we can start looking ahead to Burnley tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, we needed a pod without Gav to tell us we were going to win the Premier League and qualify for Champions League and all that, didn't we? Really, but brilliant. Thanks again, Martin.
Cheers, mate.
And thanks again to everyone for listening. We've got all of the coverage, of course, on the Roker Report website of our 3-0 win. We've got every single angle covered on there, as well as our daily releases on How We're the Podcast. And again, I don't think we're going to stop talking about this. We might start looking forward to Burnley, maybe on Friday. We'll see how it goes. But from us, it's bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.